again.
Shameel, good to see you too. It's hard to believe it's been 6 months. Let's have a look at the year-end results. Vodacom's year-end results to the end of March. Despite all the talk about competition and shrinking margins in the industry, these are good, solid results. You've got 51.7 million customers, as far as I can see. Headline earnings per share up 23%, nearly 11% increase in EBITDA, revenue up 4.5%, and on the data side, some much more glamorous numbers. Before we get into the details, give us your broad overview of the period under review.
So, Lindsay, I think it's a solid set of results from the perspective, as you say. It's been a tough year from a competition perspective, and obviously MTRs have had a big impact on our numbers. But despite all these factors, it's been a solid set of results with 4.5% growth and more importantly, almost 11% increase in EBITDA. So I think we've responded well to competition in all our markets and made sure that we've performed quite well. It's particularly pleasing was the result in South Africa, where we lost share in the beginning of the year and regained the share in the second half of the year to end the year on 52.5% revenue market share, which we're quite pleased about.
Before we get into the SA operations in more detail, just explain to us the significance of MTRs, which you alluded to just now.
So the MTRs basically, firstly, obviously it has a drag on revenue, but it has more than 2% impact in terms of the difference in performance. So if we look at our group revenue, it would have been 6.5% if we exclude MTRs.
Understood. Right, let's move on to South Africa now, because no matter how much you expand, Vodacom will always be a South African company, based in South Africa, conceived in South Africa. Your revenue in this jurisdiction up 2.9%. Service revenues down, though, and I think some people might be concerned about that. What is happening? Is it simply because of saturation, because of competition, or is there something else? And does it concern you?
So, Lindsay, I'd say firstly on the results itself. Firstly, there's the impact of MTRs, specifically the one needs to look at. And although the results show 0.4, there's a healthy increase in EBITDA of 5.4%. What we've done to drive the EBITDA growth is really restructured some of the revenue elements. And what I mean by that is that there's been a big impact on MTRs on the revenue side for one. Secondly, what we did is we did away with the calling card behavior that was impacting our numbers, which reduced revenue but increased EBITDA. Secondly, and then thirdly, what we did was basically focused on producing more handset financing and offering customers more handset financing, which also has an impact of reducing MTRs. And all of these things, and lastly, the least cost routing impact from the independent service providers also affected our numbers. So if we look at if we take these factors, and some of it was restructuring it, so it's given rise to better EBITDA growth, and probably did away with some of the, let's call it, not so healthy customers or revenue that was being generated from it. So to give an example, least cost routing was an arbitrage business, if you like, and calling cards was generating revenue, but we were paying from the subsidy. So by reducing the calling card impact, you save not just you lose some revenue, but you gain from the fact that you were subsidizing it, and that's why your margins continue to expand.
Talking about customers as you were, you've got 30.3 million now in South Africa, an increase of 5% over the period, and you've just told us earlier on that you've gone from losing market share to gaining market share. Broadly speaking, how have you done that?
So what we've done is, what we did was went back and looked at all our different pricing options and made sure that we competitive and that we're providing the best competitive value in data, in contract, in prepaid, in top-up, and so on, so that all our different offerings were producing more competitive value. And so we came up with some really smart offerings, but at the same time, and really the core of it was trying to give more value to customers whilst maintaining the spend. So we gave them more voice, more megas, more data, which we call a much more for more strategy. And basically whilst trying to maintain the spend of the customer.
Looking at data revenue for the group as a whole up 22.2%, data customers up 22.5%. It's really interesting to me to see that you're helping make smartphones and tablets cheaper, because obviously they support more data use, and that is what you're going to do. I mean, I'm a loyal Vodacom customer, but you're not going to get any more calls out of me or any more SMSs out of me. You're going to get more data out of me, and that, of course, has to be driven by new instruments.
Correct. So Lindsay, what we're doing is firstly reducing the cost of the devices by introducing more low-cost smartphones. So we're now about to introduce a below $70 Android smartphone, and that will help us to further drive data penetration. At the same time, we're introducing low-cost tablets and also providing financing on a number of these devices. So it makes it possible for people who before wouldn't been able to qualify for it to now have access to these devices.
What sort of penetration do we have in South Africa compared to other countries? And what I'm really getting at here is, how far have you got to go, and how exciting is it from an earnings point of view?
So if we look at our number of smartphones, and smartphones to a large degree drives data growth, of course with tablets and dongles as well. But we only now have 6 million. We only have 6 million data devices on the network. So we have 20% of our network on smart devices. So there's still a big opportunity to grow that a lot more. 47.5% of our customers, 14.4 million customers in South Africa, are now using data. So I'd say there's a substantial way to go in terms of increasing data uptake. And what we're doing to drive that, obviously, one of the key parts is putting devices into people's hands, but more importantly, also providing customers who are not using data with the opportunity to use data for free. And then, the ones using ad hoc data, we then convert them into daily bundles, and the daily bundles we convert into weeklies, and the weeklies into monthlies, and so on.
Shameel, you'll be very pleased to know that I've been dragged kicking and screaming into the real world, and I got myself a tablet about 3 months ago, and I don't know why I've taken so long. Hopefully a lot more people will do that. Let's go beyond our borders now to the international operations, and I quite like this because you say in your press release the international operations have reached a turning point in terms of profitability. Can you give us an overview of the international operations again over this period?
So firstly, the international operations have performed exceptionally well, Lindsay. It's now, revenue having grown 22%, service revenue having grown 22% in the international operations to 11.2 billion rand, and EBITDA from the international operations up to 2.7 billion rand. And obviously a strong expansion in the EBITDA margin of 9 percentage points. I think the big thing is that, it's obviously becoming a more meaningful part of our business now. It's contributing 17% of our revenue is now coming from the international operations, which I think is, a lot more impressive. So the, all the different operations have performed exceptionally well. If we look at our underlying service revenue growth in Tanzania, 35% plus, DRC 21%, Mozambique 30%. So, all the solid performance all around from all the international operations.
One thing that I do want to focus on is M-Pesa in Tanzania, because it's something that I think, again, low penetration in the financial services segment. Does this excite you as well?
Very much so. And I think for me, the most important part was that, we now have 4.9 million customers, 50% of our base in Tanzania using M-Pesa, and we've had a growth in M-Pesa users by 57.5%. So that was really great, and it's giving us $1.50 of additional ARPU per customer, and I think that's quite impressive. But more importantly, it's all the different services that you can access. So third-party payments has very much become part of M-Pesa now. And so you can pay for your electricity, you can pay for goods and services and so on M-Pesa, and so it's becoming one of the biggest financial institutions in the country.
Geographically, is it becoming more and more difficult for a company like Vodacom to expand their operations into other jurisdictions simply because of the competition and everyone, not just within Africa itself, but also outside of Africa, eyeing the continent jealously?
In Africa, specifically from the non-aligned operators that are basically not part of the of any big particular group, and I think there's a lot of value that we can add to those operations by bringing a lot of the synergies from Vodacom, Vodafone, and also a best practice and level of expertise and investment. You know, from a pricing perspective, you know, there's still some good value out there.
Talk about capex now, because some of the numbers that I'm reading seem very startling. Not just in terms of the absolute numbers, but also the increase. 9.2%, I think, was a figure that I saw quoted. How important is that for you to keep not only the service up to the levels you expect to your customers, but also price is quite keen?
So, Lindsay, the most important part for us is that in every market that we operate, that we have to have a clear differentiation in network. So what we've done is invested quite heavily into all the markets to keep and build on that differentiation. So in South Africa, you know, we've invested close to 7 billion rand again, and you know, that means that we have more than 50% coverage, more than 50% more coverage than our nearest competitor. So that you know, that obviously gives us an advantage. In the African operations, it's important for us to really capture the opportunity of the lower penetration by making sure that we take.
And that keeps you ahead of them.
Keeps you ahead of them. Because it keeps, you know, by building on more coverage, both 2G and 3G keeps you ahead of your competitors as well, and opens up new markets too.
Let's have a look at your prospect statement now, looking ahead, and I'm taking something from your press release. It says, mobile data is our biggest single growth opportunity with smartphone and tablet penetration at low levels in all our markets. Now, we have talked about that, but I don't think we can reiterate more strongly how important that's going to be for the future.
So, Lindsay, today, I think data growth for us today is 10 billion rand, so 16.8% of group revenue. We see that growing in the next 3 years to between 25 and 30% of revenue. And obviously, to be able to achieve that, that means that we have to build up the networks faster, invest more in smartphones and smart devices, if you like, and at the same time, you know, drive up the data usage of customers who do have these devices.
You talk about slow economic growth in South Africa. And also you talk about rising inflation and costs and keeping costs under control. This is in your outlook statement. If I can just broaden it a little bit, just to close this conversation, Shameel, it was World Telecoms Day last week, and I spoke to a number of people outside of the big operators in South Africa. I spoke to a few international people. And it just seems to me that there is such massive potential. And you, as the CEO of Vodacom, a massive operator, has to keep up with these things all the time. Is it something that excites you, or is it something that keeps you awake at night?
No, I think it's very much an exciting part in terms of how the technology is evolving, but also not only is the technology evolving and becoming faster and better and in better speeds, but at the same time, it's also helping us to become more cost efficient. So, you know, you are the new technologies do bring with it a lot of savings. So, for instance, moving to what we call single RAN or single radio access network, you know, can reduce power savings by as much as 40 to 50%. So, you know, as we roll out these equipment, we also become more energy efficient. But you know, at the same time, it's easier for us. These equipment is LTE ready, so it's easier for us to introduce LTE or 4G.
Shameel, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for your time. That's Shameel Joosub, who is the CEO of Vodacom.